Hey folks, welcome back to another review with yours truly, Sam Healey. Today we're taking a look at Axis and Allies and Zombies. It's a new game that's been put out by Avalon Hill that is taking their old classic game, Axis and Allies, making a few tweaks and changes, and adding in that extra little spice of zombification to the mix. And so let's get down to the table. I'll show you how the differences of the game work. I'm not going to show you everything about how Axis and Allies plays because that's just a lot. But what I will do is explain all of the differences that adding zombies into Axis and Allies has taken place. So let's get down to the table and we'll come back in a few moments with the final thoughts. You basically have the Axis powers, the Germans and the Japanese forces, and they're going up against the Allies, which are the Americans, which are on either side of the board, and then they have a little pocket here in China. Then you also have the British forces, which are, of course, underneath the box over here in London, UK, and then they have other forces over here as well in Australia and all that kind of stuff. And then there's also Russia, which is up here, and they're right next to Germany's forces. It's really kind of tough to play Russia. But anyway, you have these two forces, and the way you generally win is by capturing one of your opponent's capitals. For example, Berlin is right here. The red lines cities here. And then you have Moscow right here. And then you have Washington, D.C. over here. And you have London over here. And then you have Tokyo over here. So the Axis are trying to capture either Moscow, London, or Washington, D.C., and still hold their capitals, where the Allies are trying to capture either Berlin or Tokyo and still hold their capitals as well. And that's how they would win the game. But here we have this annoying group of individuals here called zombies that are entering the fray. And now there is a possibility for the game to end in what is called a zombie apocalypse. Now, what that means is that there are possibilities for there to be zombie-controlled territories, which means the IPC value of that territory is going to be controlled by the zombies. And if the zombies ever control 25 IPCs worth of territories on the board, the game will end, one more round is played, and then after that, out of the players, whichever side, the Axis or the Allies, whichever side has the most IPC values of zombie-free territories, they become the winner. You'll notice that Turkey is a neutral territory, just like Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, the Himalayas, Sahara, Spain and Portugal. These are all neutral areas, and you can't actually go into them or through them until they become non-neutral territories. Well, the only way that they can become non-neutral is if one of these cards here places a zombie in that territory, and then that territory becomes zombie controlled, and now you can go fight those zombies and liberate Turkey from the zombie hordes. And once you do that, let's say that the good old Brits did that, and let's say that now Britain controls Turkey and the Straits of Dardanelles. Now, as far as how zombies are in the playing of the game, they actually add basically just 3 new phases to every player's turn. First of all, at the beginning of every player's turn, you are required to draw one of these zombie cards. Usually it'll have the nation that is about to be affected by this, and this one says add a zombie to New Guinea. So you would simply take a zombie figure and add it to New Guinea, but you also have another area of the board down here which is an optional rule. Desperate measures is something that everybody has to agree upon to play, but I kind of recommend that you do it because it gives a little bit more zombie genre flavor to it, because there's a bunch of different things that go on that have to do with the zombies. For example, this one says at the end of the turn, if at least 3 zombies were destroyed, gain a technology of your choice from the technology chart. So the zombie technology sheet is right here, and so you would basically roll a die and be able to choose, take whichever result you get. You could get zebra suits, which means that your infantry units will be able to prevent one zombie in their territories convoys from attacking them. You could get Z4 explosives, where artillery is more effective at killing zombies now than they were before. Chainsaw tanks, your tanks, whenever they move into a zone, for however many tanks you move in, you can kill that many zombies. Air DOTs. This is where you don't have any land units present, and you're only fighting zombies. Your aircraft can continue combat for an additional round against those zombies to try to kill them and get them out of the off the board. Then you also have dead napper convoys, where you can actually use your transports to move zombies out of one area and put them into another. And then finally you have a zombie mind control ray, where you can basically push zombie hordes into adjacent areas. So using these technologies is a pretty cool thing. Other things that may happen. For example, you saw this escalation, where if this one comes up, you have to draw 2 of these cards and play them both, and then you shuffle the entire discard pile back into the deck. You have add a zombie to the eastern United States, where then you can roll a die and gain the technology indicated on the technology chart. Only the active player would be able to do something like that, though. You also have something like this, where it says add a zombie to North Africa. This always happens. It says choose a zombie occupied territory, move half of the zombies in that territory, round it up, into an adjacent territory. So these are all kinds of different things. Each player has to play one of these cards at the beginning of their turn all the time. Now, the next phase that the zombies enter into is that after they've been placed on the board, the active player has to check all of his territories, and those territories that have zombies in them, he's going to receive an attack from those zombies. And so for every zombie that is in an area, for example, let's say here in the Balkans, let's say that the Balkans have a couple of German troops here, and then they also have a zombie here as well. All right, so what's going to happen here is that since there's one zombie here, they're going to roll 1 die, and if they roll a D like that, D is for defense, then you also have A for attacking, then you also have a blank side, which is no hit. If they roll a D, then this guy is destroyed, and guess what? Since it's a game about zombies, what happens? He actually becomes a zombie for having been killed. So you can see how the zombie horde can kind of grow and fester. Well, and maybe you're worried about running out of zombie miniatures. Oh, don't worry about that. We have all these little tokens that we can use. So that's a cool thing as well. And then finally, we already mentioned this about with the in-game conditions, but in a territory that only contains zombies, doesn't matter how many are there, it could be just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, that territory becomes zombie controlled, and now it can be liberated by other factions. But what this would do is it would move the zombies IPC value up to on the track down here, and then it would move whoever controlled this down to. Now, the last way that the zombies really kind of affect how the game plays out is during the combat round, because as you can see, they have their own little zone on the combat board here, and usually the attacker fires first, and then the defender attacks back, and so forth and so on. But in a game of Axis and Allies and Zombies, the zombies actually bite first. Now, this is where these zombie dice are going to come back into effect, because remember that they had an A and a D and a bunch of blanks there? Well, that means that at the beginning of every round, these guys are going to be able to attack, and so you roll 1 die for each of the figures present, taking into effect what's rolled. So if we roll this right here, 2 Ds were rolled. That means 2 forces from the defender have to be eliminated. My infantry are easier to replace than my tanks, so I'm going to go ahead and lose them. So he goes ahead and put these into his casualty zone. Well, now that part is over. Now the attacker rolls his dice. So he's going to go ahead and roll 2 1s over here for infantry. Okay, so he missed on both of those. But here he has some infantry and artillery pairs. So he's going to be able to roll 2 or lesses for those, but it's 4 of them. So we'll go ahead and do that. And 2 2 or lesses, he got 2 hits there, so that's good. And then over here, he's got 2 tanks at 3 or less. He rolled a 3 or less, but he also rolled a 6, which has this new icon on it, which is a zombie's head kind of blowing up. Whenever you do that, you can kill one of the zombies that are out here, so he's done. All right, so this one goes away, and then he's got 1 4 or less with his bomber, and that scored a hit as well. And so now the Americans have to account for 3 hits, and the Germans have to account for 4. Every infantry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 infantry died in that battle, which means that 7 new zombies show up for the beginning of the next round. Now again, that probably wasn't a very good idea collectively from the Americans and the Germans, because this is going to be bad and ugly for both sides. So 7 dice are going to be rolled. Additionally, any other kind of unit that is lost doesn't add, it's only infantry. So these dice are rolled, and we have 1D, another D, a whole bunch of blanks, and we're going to re-roll one of those for that 7th. Okay, and 1 attacker. So 2 more defendings. So both of these are casualties now, and one of these has to be lost as well. So we'll lose an artillery so we don't add any more zombies, because my goodness, there are a lot. So what would happen here is that whatever territory this was that they were fighting over, the Americans would take control of it, but they would have no less than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zombies in that territory. Something that they will have to deal with later on. And really, that's about it for the differences that zombies bring into the game of Axis and Allies. You have this card, this deck of cards that you're going to use for just Axis and Allies and zombies. But if you have Axis and Allies 1942, you do have another deck of cards that come in this box that will be able to be used for integrating Axis and Allies 1942 with the zombies. So you would be able to do that if you wanted to, or you could just play this game as it is by itself using this setup and all of that kind of stuff. But if you wanted to integrate 1942 in it, it has an entire setup for Axis and Allies 1942. So that's about that for a general look at the basic differences that zombies bring into Axis and Allies. Now, if you've played Axis and Allies before, this will be a very easy transfer for you. If you've never played Axis and Allies before, I don't think it'll be any harder to learn than any other game that you might pick up that's in this genre or at this level of complexity with, you know, a whole lot of dudes on the map, a lot of different things and caveats that could happen, or all those kinds of things. But if you've played Axis and Allies before and you like it, I don't see you not liking this, unless you don't like the zombie genre. If you're tired of it, because that's what I hear the most about, if you just don't like it because it's gross or anything like that, you're a purist and you want just the history, you don't care about any sci-fi being thrown into it, then you're probably... You won't care about this one. So let's get into my pros and cons. Okay, the first pro of the game for me is that well, I remembered why I enjoy playing Axis and Allies. I used to play it often a while ago, and I just got away with it, especially with all of this new stuff that we have to play here, but this is new, so I got to play it, and my kids, my older boys, really enjoyed it, and their friends that we played with, they really enjoyed it as well. They just had a blast. So it is a fun game to play. It is a classic game, and I mean that in a positive way. It kind of brought me back to the roots of my board gaming hobby. This is the kind of game, Risk, I used to play a lot when I was younger. So these are the kind of games that I really kind of gravitated towards. So that's a pro. It's a classic with some new life breathed into it, which is also kind of ironic because it's zombies. A second pro to the game is the fact that what the zombies add to the game changes it in a special way, but not in a groundbreaking way. And so when new editions come out, it's important for me at least that the way the game plays doesn't change that much, but the experience you can have with the game does change. And I think that's what they've done here. Another pro for the game for me was that each country, each nation has their own sculpts for each of the different kinds of units. Whew, that's amazing to me. That's just great. And I know that's how it's been done in the past, but I was reminded of it. And that's a huge, cool thing that, my bombers look different than your bombers, and my aircraft carriers look different than yours. My battleships are better than yours because they look cooler, and, that kind of stuff. Now, with all that being said, we do need to get to some cons of the game because they are there. My first con of the game is downtime. I said earlier how this reminded me of how much I enjoyed playing Axis and Allies. It also reminded me of how much downtime Axis and Allies have. I mean, you literally could just be sitting there doing nothing for 45 minutes because everybody else is doing their turn before you do. And if you're talking about a 5-player game, oh my goodness, you're going to be sitting there for so long because you're going to have 4 other people doing their turns, and these are not short turns, people, not at all. So downtime is a huge factor in this game. So again, this is a longer game, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you just have to understand it's going to take a while. Another con for the game were the how you acquired zombie technologies. I probably should have mentioned this in the pro section because I really enjoyed the zombie technologies. It just didn't come to mind. But if you want to mentally add it to the pro section, go ahead, because I really enjoyed the different zombie technologies that you could acquire through the flipping over of those cards for your turn. Now, the thing that I didn't like about it, though, is how you acquired them. The only way you could get a zombie technology card is if on your turn you flipped over a card that allowed you to either kill enough zombies, if you were able to kill enough zombies on your turn, which would allow you to choose one, or you roll and just get one. Those are the only 2 ways that you could get zombie technologies in this game, and I thought that was kind of restrictive. Instead of, and this is just an idea, I'm just spitballing, instead of just Battleship, make it Battleship or technology. That it's the most expensive unit in the game, and if you are in dire straits and you're not able I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way, and it didn't even happen to me. You know what I'm saying? So that was a con. So all in all, that's really about it. I did enjoy the game. I think it's a great experience. It is not going to be for everybody, because downtime is a huge consideration. It's a longer game, and sometimes people just don't like longer games. But at the same time, I enjoyed myself. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I think the new things that are added to the game are good. And it was fun. It was a fun experience. 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it. So that's about that. 7 out of 10 for Axis and Allies and Zombies. Thanks for joining me. I certainly appreciate it. We'll see you guys and gals on the flip side. Take care now.